You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where each Tuesday we show business owners and entrepreneurs how to diversify into real estate by equipping you with the tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo. Hey guys, welcome to episode 140 of the Reinvest Podcast. Excited to be back in the studio. I was gone our last podcast episode because I was on the beach.
The last couple, yeah. Hopefully that warm weather did you well. And really just the water, because it's been actually too hot here. But I can't complain.
Everybody has to do whatever this translates for in your life. You got to work on your business, on your family, not just work in it. So many times the urgent crowds out the important. At least for us, Lydia and I try to be intentional on those vacations to work on those things. It is massively important.
What was one of the most beneficial things that came out of that vacation?
So for my kids, I think it's just really concentrated, uninterrupted time for dad. They have full access to me, and I know that just fills them up a ton. For me, this sounds funny. Probably not to those of you who know how many kids we have. Lydia and I have 7 kids. The thing I love the most is driving down and talking to Lydia for 8.5 hours, just uninterrupted, pretty much, from the kids. So we have really great conversation. Yeah.
You put me in a car and I can't have a conversation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's one of Amanda's big complaints. So
that's funny. Well, we're excited to get back into this today. We're going to talk about something. I think it's probably born out of me coming back from vacation and some of the thoughts that were happening. And today's title is called Breaking the Ceiling, Pushing Your Limits of What's Possible in Business and Leadership. Seth, you and I are coming up on a year transitioning out of our last brokerage, starting really our business on our own, full tilt into employees, systems, and what was possible and what you and I could do this year in the area of investing personally, our real estate agent business. And I think it's been an interesting observation as we come up to the end of a year on where we are and what's been possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of a whirlwind, and you don't know. You just don't, it's so much unknown when you're going through change. And so a lot of this has been, man, we're figuring out maybe the right way or the wrong way to do things as we go. And so one of the things, though, that it did reveal this year is that some of the stuff we were trying to do, it was correct. And, so we saw some fruit from that in our business. And so, it's been a really interesting year. It's been a fruitful year. It's been a hard year. So
one of the observations I've seen in myself is, and I've seen this through seasons in my life, I saw it as a father and a husband, you come to the point in life where you have to cross this invisible threshold of what you're comfortable, what you're equipped to do, and you're stepping into something unknown, something that you haven't faced, you haven't traversed yet, and you have to figure that out. And I feel like I'm always stepping across that invisible threshold, and it's a scary feeling to do that. It's very uncomfortable, and you really get a look at the man in the mirror because you have to see all of your flaws as a leader. You have to see the skills that you're deficient in, the disciplines you don't have, the bad habits you do have, and especially when you have a goal out in front of you, in order to achieve that, you see the discrepancy of where you are today and what you would have to perform at or the actions you'd have to do to attain that goal. And sometimes that jump feels really far, like a chasm. But that's honestly one of the fun things for me about business and investing and even fatherhood and marriage is it forces me to jump into that fray. And so I thought, Seth, you and I could highlight this last year a couple of areas where we've come up to our own personal limitation and how we broke through that glass ceiling in order to get closer to the goals we have for our family or our business. I don't know if you have one.
I can speak on one thing. And, to your point, the unfortunate, not unfortunate, think about running your own business and being a leader is that it rises and falls to your level. Your organization can't go somewhere where you're not. Your business can't go somewhere where you're not, which is, it's good and bad. But what it does is, like you said, it puts the mirror up in front of you and says, if you're not getting the results you want, if you're not getting the business you want, if you're not making what you want in your business, it's really your fault. Mm-hmm. And it's figuring out how are the ways that we can invest in ourselves, financially, with knowledge, health-wise, whatever those things are, how are the ways we can invest in ourselves so that we can continue to level up our skills. And really, if you can do that, if you can develop yourself personally, you can take that anywhere. You can take that into your family. You can take that into your marriage. You can take that into your business. You can take that into your church. You can take that anywhere. And so those are kind of the intangible things that you can't see. And so one of the things that, as we got into this year, we started ramping up our business and ramping up our transaction, our volumes, and things got really hectic. And one of the things that it showed, even though we have a virtual assistant, it showed this constraint that we have in our business of I literally cannot be as many places at once as I need to be, running signage, meeting with clients, doing showings, going to closings, writing contracts, picking up client gifts. And it was like my time is just needed too many places, and I try to spend time with my family, and I want to have that availability. And so I had read a book this year. So one of the things I invested my time in was, let's read a book, and it was called Buy Back Your Time. It's by Dan Martell. I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but mentioning it again because it's a great, worthwhile business book for anybody who's in business, anybody who's in leadership.
He's a tech CEO?
Yeah, he's a tech guy, but now he buys tech businesses, and he's still doing it, still very active out there. If you look him up, I think he has a pretty strong social media and YouTube presence too for his content. But his book, Buy Back Your Time, and as he goes through that book, he helps you take a look at what are you spending your time on? First of all, how much is your time worth? Okay, and he helps kind of take you through a formula of how to figure out how much your time is worth. And then he goes through and kind of works through your calendar, essentially, and your time hour blocks and everything that you do in a day. And it starts helping you decipher what are the tasks I should be spending time on and what are the tasks I ultimately need to delegate or hire someone to do. And so what that made me do in my business is, what are the things that only I can do, or what are the high dollar per hour tasks that are worthwhile for myself to do as someone who's experienced in real estate and experienced working with clients and has some skills that way. And what are some of the tasks that just anybody could do? Mm-hmm. And so I started having to define, well, anybody could probably go and put a sign in a yard, but it takes a physical person to do it. Anybody could go pick up a client gift, but it takes a person to do it. You could show a house pretty easily as long as you're a licensed agent without having, and I could come in on the back end and help with some of the negotiations and writing an offer, but you got to be licensed and a person has to be there. And so it's listing out some of these tasks that I don't need to do. I could pay someone, $15 or $20 an hour to go do it.
Right.
And then that way I could spend my time continuing to make new client connections, continuing to go after new listings, continuing to go after new high-level clients. And what it exposed for me was like, I think we're at the level where we can hire an employee. I think we're at the level where we have so much of this back-end work, so much of these little tasks that don't necessarily need my time that we could hire out. And so what it's pushed us to do in our quarterly meetings is to have a quarterly goal of saying, hey, this next quarter, we're going to look to hire an employee, a full-time licensed assistant. And it's kind of just that next iteration of your business. It's leveling up myself. I leveled up myself with that knowledge. And now it's okay, let's go and level up the business to get there and to free up more time. And so anyway, great book, Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. So if you have a time constraint in your business, that book will help you decipher, okay, where is the time constraint? And, where do we go from here?
Yeah, that's a good example of how that translated to the action. One of the things for me has been stepping into more of that front role of having those direct conversations with some of our commercial clients. Mm-hmm. They're older, they are established business owners, or they just have pretty extensive business experience. And I had to operate at a different level of sophistication and understanding of their world. And so one of the things that we sat down, again, once we created that cadence of planning our year out in January and then holding ourselves to quarterly segments of what we were going to go after in a 3-month basis, and then reevaluating that every 3 months, and then tracking that on a weekly basis to see if we're doing the right actions to get closer to that. That has made all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. People, I remember my pastor said this, people overestimate what they can do in a year because we want to just do massive action for a short amount of time. And you underestimate what you can accomplish in 5 years. We're going to get to the end of this year, and we're going to realize, we already have realized, that our 3-year goal, we just did in 1 year.
Yeah, we undershot our goals big time. We were so naive back in January of 2025.
So, you look at that, and you got to have the long game. So for me, I said, okay, in order for me to operate at a higher level, be able to have these conversations, hold these conversations, understand the motivations of these business owners so that we can win commercial and investment grade listings and even interact with sellers to buy investment properties. What is that action for me? What's the skill set I need to go do? And so in our industry, there's a designation called CCIM, Certified Commercial Investment Member. And essentially, it's a master's level course in commercial real estate to become an advisor for people. And so I started taking those classes. And so I'm, probably 30% of the way through. It's going to take me the better part of a year to do that. But as I've done that, I've seen how I've been able to leverage that in conversations with my clients, and not just tell them I am pursuing my CCIM, but I'm also able to take that knowledge and that sophistication into those situations. It's building my confidence too, to feel comfortable in those, with those kind of people. So there's a skill set that I lacked, and that's the beautiful part about today. There's really not an excuse to not grow in a skill. Information's everywhere, and then even more than information, there's just opportunities and ways that you can grow in your skill set. So that was pretty big for me.
And one thing is too, so many people are waiting for someone to tell them to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
And as a business owner, as a leader, I mean, you have to be seeking those things out for yourself. And, you took the initiative to do that. And it's not like anybody is like pushing you to do that, necessarily. Well, it's really just yourself and the necessity of the business.
It is.
But it's not like you have a boss that's like, hey, go get this certification.
And if you don't have a goal or a vision that you are shooting for, there's nothing to pull you towards that. And you can kind of compare yourself to somebody else and say, well, where am I in relation to that person's business or, what they're doing? And the moment you do that, I mean, you're really, it's the best way to kill growth in your life. So the other thing I think for us to pinpoint is I personally was somebody who was like, whatever was in front of me is what I did. And so when we started implementing traction into our business, now we've been through a full year where you and I have operated under that system. Mm-hmm. And it's shown me that the hectic, chaotic, kind of fast-paced, sporadic energy of pursuing something and then not sticking with it, that's how a lot of people operate. It's how I did for the first 5 years of my business. Once we started to be like very granular, very specific, and like just weekly, consistently hitting things, what would you say about 4 months into this year, we really started to see things bust loose?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it was like it was literally like magic.
Well, there's that maxim that you can't, what is that? You can't manage what you can't measure. Yes. And when we started to be able to nail down what are our key performance indicators, what are our KPIs, what are the things that we need to be doing to actually generate the business we want. Once we started tracking that on a weekly basis, it was like weird. It was like all of a sudden it was like, oh, now we know exactly what to go out and do more of to get more listings and to get more clients. Well, and it just worked. It was really weird. It was like, I didn't expect it to work like that, but it did work like that. And then it was like, oh, I guess this has how people grow their business. Right. There's no other way to do it. But until you can identify what are those specific actions that you need to be doing in your business to make it systematizable, then you won't be able to grow or have any type of predictable scale.
One of the big things now that I'm faced with is we talk about adding on another employee. As we talk about, okay, we've kind of stabilized the ships. We've proved that we can bring income into the door. the next question is, what are we building? And so for me, going on that trip a couple weeks ago in Myrtle Beach, I started reading a book called Chase the Lion, which is by Mark Batterson. It's like every visionary, it's like crack candy for a visionary. And it causes you to kind of start with the assumption we serve a big God and bold prayers honor God, right? And God honors bold prayers. And in a business capacity, what are you trying to achieve? To what end, right? You can climb the ladder, but you don't want to get to the top and realize you climbed the wrong building. And so now it's figuring out, how do you lead with vision? How do you cast something out in front of somebody, for us personally, and then the people that we want to bring a part of our team, and then the people that we're going to steward, whether it's in a client capacity, a tenant capacity, and that you realize the deficiency of living by that, eating it, breathing it. So that's kind of the next thing that I'm trying to push through as a leader is, how do you grab that vision and how do you communicate it in a way that keeps it clear for the entire organization? Because when things get hard, everybody asks themselves, why am I doing this? And how many people come to the conclusion of like, I'm making good money, but that's not really enough. And, there's a Psalm 90, Moses said, Lord, teach me in a number of my days that I would live with a heart of wisdom. So that means if I know my days are numbered and I live with that assumption, it helps me reverse engineer and say, what do I want to do today, so that I don't get to the end of my life and be like, crap, I spent it on the wrong things.
Yeah.
So I'm excited at kind of where we are that way. That would be another one for me. But
yeah. Another example in my life of kind of investing into myself in order to push forward the business in a weird way has been in my health journey. And I've shared that a couple of times. We don't need to go into all that necessarily, but how important running has become for me to even like reframe my mind and reframing how I am able to go after things in my business. And
it's taught you to run from your problems and
it's taught me to run from my problems. No, but what it's taught me, running, you go out and you just intentionally feel pain, and it takes a lot of time. And that is essentially running. If you can go out and take some pain and take the time aspect of it, you can do long distance running. And so that's what I do. And I actually have a marathon tomorrow. Hopefully that goes well. But all I'd say is that through the discipline of training, I've been training for this race for 4 months. And it's not even a race. I mean, the only person I'm racing against is myself. Mm-hmm. I'm not looking at anybody else. This is just a personal goal, a personal challenge. And it's taken 4 months of discipline to get to this one moment where I'm going to spend 3, hours and some minutes, or
hopefully,
I'm hoping to stay under 4 hours, 3 hours and, 58 minutes to run this one race. And, I'm going to get to the end and everyone's going to be like, oh, great job, pat you on the back. Mm-hmm. And they're going to say, that's amazing that you were able to do that, without having any idea that I've just ran 600 miles, spent 4 months, never cheated on my diet once, for this moment. And it's the same way in business.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can have that kind of dedication and discipline in one area of your life will generally go over into other areas in your life. And, chaos and destruction in one area of your life is going to seep into your business. It just is. You can't separate that stuff. And so being able to dial in my disciplines and stay consistent has really transferred in a lot of ways into how I run my business and how I run my transactions and how I, operate with my virtual assistant. And it's just been this weird lesson that it's hard to even translate, but it's been a lesson to me. It's really proven to myself even that I can do it. I'm like, man, if I can do it, if I can keep those commitments to myself, then I can keep them to my clients. I can keep them in my business, and I can go after these big goals, because I know even though it's a big goal, if I can be consistent, I will eventually accomplish it. And I think that's probably been the biggest thing. So I think investing that time, energy, into running, it has really correlated into my real estate business. And it's hard to say. It might even sound weird, but it's true. So I don't know. That's kind of one of the things I thought of when we were preparing for this.
Dude, I was listening to Admiral William McRaven, who's got a ton of good books if you're a military guy or even not, but you just enjoy the conversation of like discipline and mindset as a leader. He's a phenomenal guy. And he said, how you do one thing is how you do anything.
I know.
Doesn't that suck?
I don't like that.
Doesn't that suck? But it's true. It's absolutely true. And I tell myself that when I see that hypocrisy inside of myself and I want to say, well, this thing over here is unrelated to this thing over here. And it's like, unfortunately, it's not. I want to hit you guys with a quote, and then I want to ask a couple questions if you're listening to this episode that you can apply. So Isaac Newton said this: if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And it's the idea that you need to be somebody who is committed to that continual self-improvement and self-growth. And you do that by exposing yourself to what's around you, people who are doing things at a higher level. We talked about getting in the right room. How do you do that? Reading books. And like Lydia told me one time, she's like, I feel like some of my biggest mentors in this season of my life have not been people who have physically spent time with me, but authors. And I thought that was really interesting. You have access to someone else's journey, their wisdom, something that you want to go through that they have gone through, you can learn from. So I think here's the question for you listening to this. What is the goal that you are trying to attain, and who do you need to be to get there? And then you pick apart and break that down and say, okay, what are the skill sets? Who are the people? What are the disciplines that I need to implement in my life that are actually going to get me closer to that? And there is a formula. It's measurable, it's quantifiable. There are real things that you can do that will create the outcome that you want. I think, this 20-minute episode is a short testimonial of how we've seen that in our own businesses. So that's our encouragement to you guys. Until another episode on the Reinvest Podcast. As always, excited that you joined us for another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. If you want to learn how you can use your hard-earned capital to diversify into real estate, go to our website, reinvestcapital.us, and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper.